perimenopausal athletes and beyond. It's a masterclass series bringing together experts in mindset, nutrition, training, and recovery. My name is Tennille Hooglin. I am the host of this fantastic series, or I think it's totally fantastic. You can tell because I'm absolutely in love with all of the speakers and the experts that have come into our cars or our living rooms or whatever it is we're doing. And today we have the beautiful Sasha Gollish with us. Did I say the last name correct?
Close enough. Gollish, goldfish. It was, all the things.
All the things.
All the things growing up.
Yes. And Sasha comes, she has a real breadth of experience, as many coaches do. Like if you ask coaches, what have you done? It's usually like a lot. It's like we have a tendency to have done so many little pieces that bring us to this like traffic controller kind of personalities. But let me see if I can explain, just to share a little bit more about you. So you still are an elite athlete, which is super cool. So you have, you're elite athlete and specifically a runner. You have the fastest mile, Masters 40 to 44 indoor record in the mile. So she ran a mile. I don't even run a kilometer in this. 4:38. Let me tell you, that would be like really pushing some threshold if we just change it from a mile to a kilometer. In any case, she's a high performance coach. She's a professional engineer. So what I think is neat is understanding why Sasha and I get along so well is because we love science. We are very analytical, and she brings us into her coaching and into the way that she be. She has, after leaving her university teaching career, she has launched the business called HāCōch, and it is really about helping athletes, people of all, we can talk specifically about who it is you're serving, but to prepare for the success in all of your life's events. So am I missing anything in this bio that you would like me to say?
No.
We summarized it. We got it. All right. Well, thank you so much. Okay. So Sasha, this is, when we were preparing for this, there was one thing that one thread I want to start on with you. And I'm hoping that you'll share a little bit about your history and your experiences representing Canada and Team Canada, your experience as being a university teacher and now as a coach, and why you believe it's so absolutely important that we learn how to advocate for ourselves and start to understand some of the challenges that we as female athletes in perimenopause and beyond have to be aware of in terms of the stigmatization, you're getting old, don't do that, be careful. It's, when we're younger, it's like, oh, well, she has her period. Now it's like, oh, she has a hot flash. And it's these negative, like really, this is it. This is exactly it. And this is something that you have grappled with and are now bringing it into your coaching, but it didn't come from nowhere. So can you share a little bit more about your story and some of the reasons and how it is that you have become such a strong voice in helping females know how to use their voice?
Sure. I think I had the great fortune in life to have one of the greatest role models, my mom, who, was the, glass ceiling smasher from a very early age. My mom she's an anesthesiologist. Don't ask me to spell that. No. Barely say it. Okay. And, working at a time when it was a very male dominated industry, and, medicine's made great headway, and, enrollment is about 50-50 now, but back then my mom pursuing medicine and pursuing the administrative roles really taught me as a young girl and a young woman how important it was to stand up for what you believe in, and along the way asking for what you need to be able to do that, and watching this brilliant partnership between my parents so that they supported each other in their careers. And not to say one person took a step back so that somebody could take a step forward, but just being each other's champions and having that. And so in turn, that came down to us as young children in advocating for ourselves in our home. And, it was, we were never allowed to quit anything, of course, right? If you signed up for something, you had to commit to it. But we were also encouraged to discuss the challenges that we were having. And sometimes, and I think, very importantly in my life in terms of consistency and commitment, seeing that those challenges weren't something to necessarily walk away from something, but to figure out how to advocate for myself in that domain, and also figure out where my responsibility lay in terms of helping to advocate for myself, so that I wasn't pointing fingers and blaming something or some program for something, but taking ownership for what I was doing in whatever endeavor I was committed to.
What you're pointing to is something really, really important. And that is, when we take ownership, we stop being a victim.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And when we stop being a victim, then we are empowered to act, and we own our power. So tell me, if you will, so your family, your history has, led you, and it's so important. Like, it was really interesting. On the weekend, I was supporting a bunch of teenage girls, and we were talking about relative energy deficiency in sport and nutrition and owning your journey. It's with the She Is team. And we talked about this idea of being able to, what does commitment look like? And being able to let it, like, when do you skip a practice? What does this look like? And how that interfaces with understanding how to advocate yourself. And I'm wondering how you think or talk to that. It's like, these are things and principles we're teaching or wanting to teach to our young women, but it is still as important today as athletes in perimenopause and beyond. And yet we have to keep on learning this process. So what do you think looks different as an athlete in perimenopause and beyond specifically? Like, where is it that you want to see us advocating more strongly?
I really think it's the destigmatization, another big word,
Yeah.
Around talking about the menstrual cycle, throughout our lives. And then as we move into this perimenopausal phase, that, there's almost this giant body of research happening in our menstrual cycle, and this giant body of research happening in menopause. But there's this, the great resignation, this great transition period in our lives, that we need to be able to advocate that this is a really important part of the journey as well. And not to say let's stop devoting resources to these two areas of research, but that this area is equally as important. Mm-hmm. And having those conversations, not just with other women, but men as well, to say, here's where I'm at in my training cycle as an athlete, right? And here's where I'm at age-wise. And, I think one of the things you need to do for yourself, and it's made a big difference in my life, is actually tracking your cycle so that you know which phase of your cycle that you're in to adapt your training, and to have a very objective conversation with your coach or with other athletes that you're training with, like, hey, this is what I might need today. So I might need, if I'm doing 400-meter repeats, usually on 1 minute rest, depending on where I am on my cycle, I can actually go down to maybe 50 seconds when you're in like phase 1 and you have your period, or I think it's phase 3 where I might need a little bit more time, but I get the same response. And so how can we coordinate our workouts so that everybody gets what they need in a very objective way? And again, in the sense that destigmatizing this conversation so that, those that come after us can continue to have these conversations in a very open way, where it's about your performance as opposed to sort of, doing a little bit of the safe sport training, like that old school mentality of the emotions that are attached to a female and their cycle. That we can talk about how our menstrual cycle and through the perimenopausal phase, how it benefits us as athletes and how to best coach us, and how we can advocate for ourselves so that we know we're getting the best coaching that we need.
Mm-hmm. It's super interesting because there's this piece of females want that social connection and to lift each other up, and particularly among young, but I see it as equally strong in female athletes in perimenopause and beyond. Like within my own group of Team Element, like the bonds are strong. We do lift each other up. And yet you mentioned, and I think it's important to understand something that you said, is that we live in a soup of messaging, and how to tease ourselves out of that so that we can come up on our own feet with our own voice, and then know, well, it's my performance, not compared to another's. And so we are inspired by, but it is my performance, not compared to somebody else. Because at this stage of life, and this will come into a question, at this stage of life, how do you see that happening? Like we talk about performance, finding out what you need, syncing with your cycle if you still have one, listening to your body if you're not having a cycle anymore. How do we come interaction with others and trying to remove that comparison piece, and what does that look like?
So actually, I think there's layers of an onion that you have to take off first. And, hello, I'm Sasha Gollish. I'm a recovering perfectionist. And the first layer is to stop comparing yourself to your former or future self that you believe that you can be. And I think as women, we tend to be worse about comparing ourselves to who we are or who we want to be. And sorry, I'm blanking on his name. The Practice of Groundedness. Brad Stulberg wrote this beautiful book, The Practice of Groundedness. Yeah, that one. Yep. I have it in digital and print copies because I can't get enough of it.
Don't we love it? Hey,
changed my life, right? I used to show up to practice, and my coach would say, with well-meaning intentions, this is your 1500 meter pace today. And as opposed to celebrating what that was in that moment, I was like, I can't think of it that way. I got to think about who I'm trying to become. And I think it really derailed those practices. It takes away joy. It takes away just actually celebrating the things that you can actually do. And so first, you have to stop comparing yourself to maybe who you were in your 20s, your 30s, pre-kids, super mom strength, post-kids, and just celebrate what you can do. And then that second layer is not comparing yourself to those around you. So I had the great fortune last summer to train with two Olympians, Madeline Kelly and Lucia Stafford. And they were my training teammates when I was doing my PhD and competing for the University of Toronto. And they whooped my butt every practice. And there was no sense of feeling diminished or sense of self-pity. I was so excited for what not just my teammates, but these are like my friends and young women that I absolutely love could do. But when I started celebrating their success within workouts, having no comparison to them, it was unbelievably amazing what I started to be able to do as well. And I, especially last summer, it was this very funny, I'm turning 40 this year. I'm going to turn 40 on December 27th. All of a sudden, I'm going to wear a business suit every day. And my life as a former athlete, it's just new chapter. You walk into a corporate office, that doesn't exist anymore, which was this very strange, not actually happening idea. And I had not, in a sense, limited myself, but I had, I guess in a sense, set this fence that I had to get fence post that I had to get to. And the second I let go of that and was like, oh, who cares if you turn 40? It's just a number. I really was able to, again, advocate for myself and celebrate the journey, but I couldn't celebrate that journey because I couldn't advocate for myself. And I didn't know that I wanted to celebrate, that I was just in it. And it all stemmed back to first, not comparing myself to whomever I thought I was going to become or who I was before. And then second, not comparing myself to those around me.
Super interesting. What you're talking to, one of the things you're talking to is identities. Mm-hmm. And how we have so many identities. And when we're truly in our power, when we're truly able to have our voice and the 2 feet on the ground, is when we're not shutting any of these identities down, because we bring our whole self. And this is why sport is so unbelievably important, not just because it's a venue of stress release and health and all these other things that we want to like tote and hang our hat on, but because it is inherently like, find your athlete within, because that's going to be who you get to show up when you walk in that door with your business suit, or when you walk in that door as a mom, a grandma, whatever it is, the identities that we carry. So is that, alongside of that, I do want to touch on something that I know we also are really highly aligned with, and that is on our values. And how do those things connect? How do our values and are our values the same in each of our identities? What is that thread that weaves us through, so that we can come back into center of like who we are being as athletes, who we are being in life?
Well, I think you bring up a really good point, and that, this is true for me, and I can't speak for other people, but I suspect the research will support it, but when you don't live your identities in silos, but when they're holistically knit together, like, yes, if I walk into a boardroom, I am absolutely a runner, but that's not necessarily why I'm there that day. But that piece of me comes with me. I can't leave that behind, right? I'm going to have the plastic water bottle and likely be drinking out of a plastic water bottle to stay hydrated, right?
Yeah, I'm sure your listeners will love that.
But I just want to have a water bottle with me.
Yeah.
It brings me great comfort. And so for me, when my values, and I revisit my values every year. I really revisited them and modified, changed some this year. It actually speaks to this idea. I really have knit together who I am, as opposed to trying to live in these silos. I really struggled in my PhD because I felt forced that I had to live in a silo. I had this wonderful supervisor who never wanted me to live in a silo, who absolutely celebrated that I was this Team Canada runner pursuing 2 high-level endeavors at the same time. The institution and those running the program I was in didn't quite feel the same way. And so while I had this sort of safe bubble in my supervisor's office, outside of that, it was really challenging. And it broke me down a bit, but it in the end made me a much stronger person. And it was part of, in revisiting these values, just how important it is for me to have my identities, as you call them, stitched together. And, so I missed making the 2016 Olympics, and it was like just absolutely devastating for me.
Yeah.
As athletes, have gone through, I was injured. I didn't want to watch the opening ceremonies. And then I listened to an interview with Erica Wiebe. I was driving, I was listening to CBC, and it just came on, and I was like, and I almost went to change it because it was talking about the Olympics. And I was like, nah, I really respect this woman. She had just won the gold medal in wrestling. And what I didn't know is Erica missed the Pan Am Games the year before and comes back and wins the gold medal in Rio. Like, that says a lot. And she said what got her through was that she was in school and that she demanded excellence from herself in other facets of her life when things weren't going well. And not to say that I had made that mistake, but that it was, when running's not going well or whatever else isn't going well in your life, to like not just solely focus on that, right? To go back and focus on where you can derive your strengths and excellence in other facets of your life, so that you can bring back up that area that you're struggling in. And if we're always playing to our weaknesses or our gaps or our mistakes, we forget this positive strength that we have that lifts us up. And that really reminded me this year that, like, just how much I need to think about that and have this self-compassion. So compassion is one of my values, and self-compassion, because we're really bad at it typically as women.
Yeah.
But just how important it is to have that self-compassion across all areas of my life, both when I do really well at something, when I show up, and when things don't go so well.
So I want to pause, because it's really powerful what you've just said and what you just shared. And how do we, it's this who we be in one thing. So I'm just recapping, like if in my own words, so I really understand it or grasp it. So who we be in one thing is who we get to be in all the things. And sport, why you and I do the work we do is, well, because we love sport ourselves, and because we see it as the power. And like, if you think about, I'll just use a marathon, it could be in any sort of thing that you do, but it is such a micro example. Like it takes you from the excitement of the new thing, like that's the start line. And then you go through the race and you go through, like you're connected with people, like right when we start the race, it's like everybody is just like the stampede, the energy, everybody is going. It's kind of like COVID, what happened in COVID. Like, oh my goodness, we're all in it together. It is totally what's happened in COVID, right? So we, all is like, we can do this. Let's bang the pots at the beginning of COVID. Come together, come together, come together. Okay, this is getting long. This is getting hard. This is getting this way. And what at the end of the day, how did we and how are we still showing up?
Right.
And that sport, how we show up in a race, how we show up in the event, how we show up, it doesn't have to be a race. Like an athlete is an athlete. Like this is why bringing athlete into all of us, into all of what we can be is, I think, accessible to anybody, because you can be, these principles are, we just like to do it in sport, but we bring it into everything.
Yeah. I think, as I reflect listening to you say that, I think the other thing that ties it all together is connection.
Oh,
right. So when you're having those bad days, right, you text the person and I did this weekend, and I knew someone that's important to me that had a bad day. And I just sent them a note and I said, hey, thinking of you, sending you a virtual hug. I know your day didn't go how you wanted it to. And, the person replied and said, yeah, I can put my coaching hat on and just like understand it. And I said, yeah, don't worry about that. Don't put your coaching hat on. Put your grieving hat on. Just grieve for 24 hours that things didn't go the way you wanted. Hug your kids, hug your husband, right? And then you'll be able to let go, because otherwise we sort of like harbor that, but we harbor it alone, right? As opposed to reaching out to those that are important to us. And, this woman she's a strong, amazing woman. And I know that she is like me and likes to be able to do things on her own. But the best lesson that I have learned coming through COVID is connection. And when you're struggling, you don't do it in isolation. You reach out to the people that you trust the most. And you literally just have to say, right, advocating for yourself, I'm having a really hard time right now. Can you help? And, they will, like, listen, they got to be the right people, but they'll say yes.
Yeah, they totally will. They totally will. It's find a community, constantly find your community, find who you feel connected to and what the environment is. Let's talk. I just want to talk a tiny bit about that, because I think it's such an essential part, and I haven't talked about that much in the interviews. And what is it? You talked about, being with these two Olympians and lifting, like, your excitement. What are the other components of community that you really think are essential? So it's this, that's one piece, lifting each other up, inspiring each other. You've talked about self-compassion, being compassionate to others, being right down into the emotion, not trying to fix it, just being there. You've mentioned those sorts of things. Is there anything else that when you're thinking about or helping or having this conversation with people about find your community, what else do you think is an important component?
The sort of fitting in versus belonging, for sure, that Brené Brown stuff, where being able to be your true self. And, listen, like, we all make mistakes, we all have bad days, and sometimes I act like a jerk. Being able to really apologize to someone and say, I really made a mistake there. I'm sorry for the way I acted, period. No, but, like, just full stop. Right. but it's really important that you have that community where you belong, where you don't have to put on a facade, a shirt, whatever it is that makes you not you. You need to show up as your true self to really have belonging. And I think that is such a vital part of community.
It's interesting because we're talking more about, not enough of, and I recognize my own limitations in this massively, in terms of diversity. And I know the Live Feisty crew is an amazing crew. That's a media hit play not pause. Celine Yeager, Dr. Stacey Sims, Sarah Gross. This is the people that you want to follow. In any case, they are really advocating for diversity and this idea of belonging, not fitting in, it's again coming into our values and our identities, and that, you know, we may look different, but this is one identity. Like it might even not be an identity, it just might be what it is. And right. So what are all, like, in some of the learnings, and I even worry I'm not going to say it right, but, you know, so we might have an African American woman. That is just one piece. This is one piece. So, you know, as a white woman, it is one piece of me. It is not all of me. And so we're showing up again with all of ourselves, with all the varying values that we have. And so what belongs, the belongs is the core. It's not what we put out there as the image, the elite athlete. Everybody needs to be looking a certain way. It's not true.
It's not true.
Yeah.
But I think that comes back to values, no, right? Where living true to who your values are. I don't want to be known as the elite athlete. I want to be known as the girl that's consistently showed up. I want to be known as the girl that had compassion, self-compassion when her practice or her presentation didn't go well, and compassion for those when they're having a hard day. Like, hey, let me lead this interval. Like, let me lead this meeting. I see you're having a tough time. Like, showing up, being able to do that, right? Committed. I want to be known as the person that was committed, that didn't bail on my friends, right? Like, you know, like, listen, if you get sick, please don't spread your germs. But like, yeah, other than that, like, you know, honor your commitments. I also don't want to be the person that's like, oh, I'm so busy, let me schedule in for a coffee 2.5 weeks from now. Like, that's not being a friend. And that's not being committed to the important people in your life either.
Gosh, this is so important. I think I want to, just because it's really right where I landed this weekend. And so I am support and a presenter for the She Is team, and the She Is team starts their presentation. Heidi Ulrich starts her presentation saying, she is what? And this is the way the format of this is, we have a lot of Olympians, we have world champions, and these are the people that are speaking to these young girls. And not a single one, just like you mentioned, says she is an elite athlete. And that's how I introduced you, though. And this is where I'm almost thinking I want to change the introductions. So, you know, maybe like, what is it? Who do we be? What are we most proud of? Like, if we have all our accolades, because that's what in society we're talking about. But what if I would say, Sasha, this woman, let me tell you, she honors her word. She honors herself to say who she wants to be. And if she doesn't show up entirely how she is, she doesn't get stuck there, because she's going to create the possibility again by living into her best life. Like, this is the way and the essence. So she is. And so, yeah, I love that. I thank you so much. Okay. We're going to run out of time here. So I have one more thing that we need to get into. Is there anything that you wanted to say on that before I just kind of like magically like switch gears just a tiny little bit?
No, the one thing is, you introduced me as Sasha Gollish, and, you know, the first story I told was the story of my family. And so, you know, I think, you know, Gollish, right? Like, you know, that's how you introduced me. And that's really what resonates in my life. That's what sets my values. That's what taught me to show up. That's who made me who I am. And so, this is the Romeo and Juliet. What's in a name? What's in a name? Everything. Everything's in a name.
That's really neat. Yeah, it is, because it's how we represent ourselves. And what does that mean? So when you introduce yourself, everybody, when you're listening to this, is my name is.
Yeah.
And what that, your name is your values. Your name is how you're going to stand on 2 feet when it's really hard to advocate for yourself. And when you're, like we talk about it, face down in the ring, covered with mud. That is totally a Brené Brown thing, right? Like, how are you going to stand up and be? That's your name. That's who you represent. And that's who we want to show up as all the time, not just as athletes in our sport, but all the time, because that's what weaves through. Okay, switch gears.
Okay.
There's one thing that when we were preparing for this interview, it just kept on coming up. Like, I was like, okay, we're going to have to say something about this. Because I know at the core, you, like, all of this is really nice stuff. Like, it's amazing. I love talking about it. I'm sure our listeners are going to love to hear about it, but you can't have any of it unless we have, what would that be? Sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, okay. And my poor partner, like, so the other week we had a fight over a baked potato, right? A baked potato, of all things. I was really hungry, but I was really tired.
Yeah.
And, I ended up having my niece and nephew for a week. We all know what's going on in the world right now. Kids have bedtime routines, right? Screens go away. You read a story, you brush your teeth, you read another story, you go pee, you read another story. But, right? Listen, you got to pee before you go to sleep. Nobody wants you to.
Oh my goodness, you totally need to pee before you go to sleep. Yeah.
But if you think about young children, we want them to sleep well. And we know that they show up every day as the best version of themselves if they start with the foundation of a good sleep. Then you want to get some breakfast in them, want to get them a little bit of exercise. But if they don't have that sleep, we know that they're really challenging to deal with. So I'm sure that I had 1 or 2 bad nights of sleep leading into the baked potato incident where I apologize for fighting over a baked potato, and there was no bacon. I was really upset. I was really hungry, really tired. But it just goes to show you, you can't show up as your best self when you're tired, right? Like, yeah, like, you can eat well, you can get moving, you can do all these other things. But if you are, like, innately tired and tired all the time, there's just nothing that you can do to actually show up as the best version of yourself. And so you really, am I trying to give people advice? No. Am I telling you that you really need to sleep? Yes, but it's not me. I mean, it's all the sleep experts. But if you, as a perimenopausal athlete, want to be the best version of your athlete self, your boardroom self, your mom self, your auntie self, whoever you show up in that identity, you have to have founded it on a solid night of sleep, and holistically solid nights of sleep. You can have bad nights every so often, but that can't be the norm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love it. And I think it's an important, like, I think that it's the place where we can close it, because it is at the foundation, and the foundation of our emotional agility. It's a foundation of our physical restoration. It's a foundation of, our digestive system, how we actually nourish our body. You're right. Is it advice? No. Is it from every expert in every field talking about how it is at the essence? Yeah. So I think it's just important to, as a, health, public health service announcement, of just reminding people, get your routine, storybook, snack, storybook, pee, storybook. Like, how are you
always
doing?
Storybook.
It may take a while, and it's all in routine. So I have one final question for you, and that is one I'm asking all the experts. And the question is, was there one moment in time, like, is there a moment that you can really say, aha, this was it, that you decided, I need to be a coach. Like, I need this business. Hey, coach, like, this is my calling. Actually, it's burning inside of me. I got to do it. Was there one moment, or was it a kind of a like, so many things that came in, and all of a sudden it was kind of like, you're doing it?
It's a great question with a short answer of, I don't know. I thrive watching people have success. I thrive watching people try something new and, really encouraging them as they go through, this feels different and awkward to, really challenging. This doesn't feel bad. This is just something new. I don't think there was the TSN turning moment of when I knew I wanted to be a coach. I think I was raised by two people who really are coaches at the heart of it. And I'm following in their footsteps.
That's amazing. It's amazing that you say that, because your mom is an anesthesiologist, and yeah, well done, Tennille. And the other identity that you see in her is coach, and it's how it shows up, and it's really fascinating. What a gift as an anesthesiologist, taking people through one of the hardest points of somebody's life. And I say that with personal experience of seeing the role of an anesthesiologist. So an anesthesiologist puts people under, essentially. They do a lot of things, but they manage all the symptoms of keeping you alive while you are while you're getting worked on, right?
Yeah.
That's an essence of it. And so I just know those conversations. Anyways, it is really a powerful thing what you just said. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing. I do want to ask you, you have something that you are providing to all of our listeners, and it's the tenets of, can you explain it and share what you're giving us all?
Sure. Okay, so Zoom and also Sasha's left brain, right brain. There is my logo on one side, and then there's all these icons, although there's this new funky word that the kids are using these days. But if you were going to think about making yourself a better version of yourself every day, what would you need to do? Well, we touched on point number 1, right? You got to sleep soundly, right? Yeah. Set the table there by doing that. Step 2 is to think about fueling the machine, right? Which is a little different than your diet or nutrition. So really thinking about it in terms of how it's fuel. This idea of getting moving. So even in your busiest times when work is so busy and kids are so busy and everything's so hectic, actually making that time to move and ideally get outside and connect to nature when you do it. Mindset, right? Really knowing that your mindset matters. One of the things I'm teasing out these days is toxic positivity, and actually being able to say, things are great, but there's also these challenges, and that not to show up with toxic positivity, because it's really dangerous and it's really unhealthy. And then finally, I think that you and I touched on so much today, fostering connection.
Yeah, that's perfect. And so this is, you bring these to light and help us understand them in a really concrete way. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing yourself wholly, and for the things that you want for all the athletes that are listening. So yeah, all the best. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for putting this together. I think it's a really important step forward for us being able to advocate for ourselves out there.
Amen.